They called it the Gathering of Worlds, a once-in-a-generation meeting where the Galactic Council summoned its vassals to renew their pledges, pay their tributes, and remember their place in the cosmic order. From the ice colonies of Drathuan to the golden towers of Nithra Prime, every species bowed, every race complied, every voice submissive, except one. Earth was the last to arrive, and I was the poor bastard sent to represent it. They called me Commander Ash Brenner, but titles meant little in that room. I was no emperor, no high priest, just a soldier, a man forged in the mud and fire of Earth's last wars. And yet somehow I stood across from gods cloaked in starlight, waiting to hear my species beg like all the others. The council chamber was impossibly large, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid orbiting a dead star, ancient and echoing with the voices of the powerful. The 11 high seats shimmered above me, avatars projected from across the galaxy. Each of them a leader of empires that had ruled longer than Earth had walked on 2 legs. The speaker of the council was a creature named Rul Khan, 10 feet tall, eyes like obsidian pits, voice like glass dragged across metal. "You are late, human," he hissed. "The tribute schedule was delivered. Your delay insults the council." I didn't flinch. I didn't kneel. I just stood there, in the uniform I'd worn too many years, hands behind my back, jaw tight. "Earth doesn't pay tribute," I said. The room fell quiet. Not a stunned silence, a dangerous one, the kind that comes right before someone draws a blade. Rul Khan's neck twisted unnaturally. "We saved your kind from extinction after your planet choked on its own greed. We gifted you technology, cleansed your skies, cured your sicknesses. You will repay us, human." He expected a negotiation, a compromise, maybe even a little groveling. But that wasn't going to happen. I pulled a small comm drive from my coat and slotted it into the projection node. Earth's message had been pre-recorded by our surviving leaders, unified for once in our history. Not because we wanted peace, but because we'd had enough of pretending we weren't built for war. The council leaned in as the message played. A single word. One syllable. Spoken in the deep, tired voice of an old general who'd buried friends beneath red dirt and watched cities burn. No. That was it. No long speeches, no pleasantries, just one word. The silence that followed was alive, buzzing, humming, waiting to see who would speak next. Rul Khan's projection blinked. Is this a declaration of war? I didn't move. It's worse. It's defiance. He sneered. You think you can stand against the combined force of the council? We don't need to stand, I said. We just refuse to kneel. He laughed, a low, ancient rasp of amusement mixed with disbelief. Your people are primitives. You still burn fossil fuels in some sectors. You have one fleet, barely space-worthy. Your moon base is armed, I cut in, and so is Mars, and Europa, and every backwater asteroid we've colonized with our own blood and sweat. You'll be wiped from the stars. I leaned forward slightly. Maybe. But not without reminding the galaxy why humans were born screaming and never learned to stop. They didn't respond. Not with words. Their avatars blinked out, one by one, leaving only cold shadows where gods once sat. And in that hollow, echoing silence, the galaxy felt something it hadn't in a long, long time. Fear. Back on Earth, the silence from the Galactic Council wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. The kind of silence that sat on your chest and didn't let you breathe. The kind that came before thunder cracked the sky. I landed at the World Military Command in New Zurich 2 days after the gathering. Nobody shook my hand. Nobody welcomed me home. They just watched me like I'd lit a fuse under the entire planet. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" General Riker barked, slamming his hands on the table. "I did what I was ordered to do," I said, standing rigid in my still dusty uniform. "You were told to deliver the message," he snapped. "You weren't told to spit in the gods' faces while doing it." I stared him down. "They're not gods. They bleed like everything else. That's the mistake everyone keeps making." The war room was packed. Commanders, scientists, economists, even a few surviving diplomats who still believed this could be talked down. The holographic map in the center displayed the solar system, with blinking red warning markers along every known wormhole and council approach route. The council hadn't responded yet. That made everyone more nervous. "They'll come," Riker muttered. "Not with words, with fleets. They won't warn us. They won't negotiate. They'll descend like fire, and they'll make Earth a lesson." A heavy silence fell across the room. No one disagreed. I broke it. "Then let's make them regret choosing Earth for their lesson." Some laughed. Bitterly. Like soldiers at the edge of a grave, they were digging for themselves. But not everyone. One man stood from the shadows near the back. He was older, face carved with time, eyes dull but sharp at the same time. Director Morrow of the OSI, the Office of Strategic Inhumanities. If black projects had a god, this was it. "I agree with Commander Brenner," he said quietly. "They think we're soft. They think the surface speaks for what's buried underneath." He walked slowly toward the projection. "They've forgotten we were killers before we were civilized, that we burned each other before we discovered the stars, that our first instinct was survival, not submission. Let them come. We'll remind them." The first ships arrived 6 days later. Not an armada, just a probe fleet, 3 destroyer-class vessels, scouts, not meant to attack, just to watch, to measure our fear, to send back readings on our defenses, our reaction time, our will. They made the mistake of hovering near Titan. That was their first mistake. We didn't broadcast warnings. We didn't posture. We simply launched. Project Dreadspire had been buried beneath the surface of Titan for 12 years, its existence known to only a handful of military and Black Op engineers. A railgun the size of a city, powered by a fusion core stripped from a failed StarCore experiment. One shot, if calibrated right, could split a cruiser in half before its shields even adjusted. The first ship didn't have time to blink. The second managed to fire 2 rounds. One missed completely. The other grazed a Martian defense satellite and fizzled in atmosphere. The third tried to run. It never made it past the Oort cloud. We didn't salvage their wreckage. We left it floating, scarred metal and drifting bodies, a message clearer than any broadcast. That was our reply. When the council finally spoke again, it wasn't through ambassadors or delegates. They sent a herald. Her name was Kareth, a being made entirely of living crystal, designed to terrify. She landed on Earth personally, breaking centuries of protocol. That alone told us how serious this was. I met her in the ruins of Geneva, chosen because it was neutral once, long ago. Now it was ash, a symbol, maybe, of how peace had become a memory. She stood twice my height. Her voice was like singing metal. "You've killed our scouts." I didn't respond. She tilted her head. "That is an act of war." I stared at her through tinted lenses. "You already declared war when you demanded tribute. We just accepted." She stepped forward. "You misunderstand. This is not a war you can win. It is not even a war you will survive." I smirked. "Then we'll be the most dangerous corpse you've ever stepped over." Her crystal eyes narrowed. "Why resist? You are outnumbered, outgunned, outclassed. What does humanity gain by fighting?" I didn't answer with words. I reached into my coat and handed her a tablet. She read it. A single image. An orbital schematic showing a self-destruct device buried in the Earth's mantle. One that would crack the planet's crust and set the atmosphere on fire if activated. Her face twisted in confusion. You would destroy your own planet? If it means taking a chunk of your council with us, I said quietly. Yes. Kareth looked up at the sky, then back at me. For the first time, she looked unsure. Who leads you? She asked. No one, I said. That's why you'll lose. She left without another word. But we knew what was coming next. The build-up began. Council fleets massed at the edge of Council-controlled space, Titanfall-class destroyers, Ark-level carriers, slave fleets from subjugated species, conscripted and stripped of hope, now pointed at Earth like a weapon. We didn't match their size. We couldn't. But Earth was never about matching. We were about bleeding them until they gave up. The moon was turned into a fortress. Every crater hid railguns and missile silos. Mars was mobilized, its underground cities emptied and converted into drone factories. Even the derelict platforms in orbit were pulled from the sky, reworked, repurposed. Anything that could float was given teeth. We didn't build to win. We built to make them hurt. That's what they didn't understand. See, the Council fought for dominance, for control, for wealth. But humanity? We fought because we had nothing left to lose. We were good at that. Too good. I watched the first wave enter our system from an old mining platform near Neptune. The stars blinked as their armada arrived, 1,000 lights moving like gods returning from exile. You ready for this? Asked Lieutenant Kane beside me, a grizzled Martian vet who'd lost both legs to a rail fire incident and had them replaced with ground-forged titanium. I nodded slowly. Born ready. They'll burn Earth, he muttered, just to prove a point. Then we'll burn their memory of it, I said. Let the stars carry our echo. He chuckled, hollow and dark. We're not supposed to win this. I looked at him. We're not here to win, Kane. We're here to make sure they never forget us. He smirked. That we can do. By the time their fleets reached Mars orbit, we were ready. The first human losses were catastrophic. Orbital silos fell like meteors. Drone fleets were wiped out in minutes. The Martian sky bled fire. But then we struck back, and something in their lines began to crack. They weren't used to prey that fought like predators. We didn't flee, we charged. We didn't retreat, we regrouped and countered. Every Martian death bought them a blood-soaked inch, and it cost them time, fuel, resources, and morale. The Council had forgotten one key thing. You don't threaten extinction to a species that's already survived it. Again and again, through ice ages, famines, global wars, collapses, and rebirths, we weren't just survivors. We were evolution's unfinished project. We were unfinished for a reason. The Martian skies were a burning hell. What used to be red dust and blue horizon now blazed under artificial stars made of fire and shrapnel. The first wave had struck us with clinical precision, Council destroyers sweeping in tight formations, dropping tungsten rods and plasma charges on our outer defenses like it was a military drill. They expected resistance, but not carnage. They wanted compliance through punishment, a warning to Earth. But what they got was war. I watched from the command deck of the Vulture's spine, a half-salvaged Earth ship fused with alien tech we barely understood, bristling with guns we weren't even sure would fire more than once. Sir, Sector 9 just went dark, reported Ensign Reed, her voice tight. We lost the Korolev spire. Any survivors? I asked. Doubtful. We picked up one last transmission, just screaming. That was all too common now. Screaming was the soundtrack of our survival. It meant we were still human, still feeling. I nodded. Log it. Mark the wreck for salvage. We'll need every screw, every bolt. Yes, Commander. I stepped away from the console and stared at the tactical screen. Dozens of red blips, council ships, still hovered in Mars orbit. A few green ones flickered and died out as our defense grid failed sector by sector. But some blips were white. Those were human assault teams, suicide units with nothing to lose. Patch me through to Hammer 6, I ordered. The line crackled, then a voice filled with static and resolve responded. 6 here. You're 5 clicks below orbit. How close can you get to the flagship? Close enough to scratch the paint, sir. Won't be pretty. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to make them bleed. A pause. Then laughter, bitter, human, grounded. Copy that. We'll make it bleed. The line went dead. I stood in silence for a moment, staring at the map. We weren't winning. We never were. But we weren't breaking either. That was the part they didn't understand. We weren't like the other species that bent the knee when a god pointed a finger. We'd stare the god in the face and spit blood in his eye. Hammer 6 was one of our most dangerous assets. 6 men with nothing left to live for, dropped in orbital pods retrofitted from mining gear. No guidance, no safety, just impact, breach, and chaos. They hit the side of the Council's flagship like angry hornets. The ship's shields had just flickered after a plasma coil overloaded from our earlier cannon barrage. 1 second of vulnerability. That's all they needed. The breach was successful. We didn't get a full transmission, just garbled audio, shouts, gunfire, an alien voice screaming, "What are they?" That was the last we heard. When the flagship exploded, splitting open in orbit like a rotten fruit, there was silence in Council Command frequencies. Their entire formation halted. Confused, disoriented. We seized the moment. Our ships weren't built to last, but they were built to bite. One by one, smaller vessels began crashing into Council ships, detonating EMP cores and hacking devices coded in languages made to confuse alien systems. Some Council ships shut down entirely, falling to Mars like broken stars. Others went rogue, turning on friendly targets until self-destruct commands were activated. It wasn't a victory, but it was a message. We don't need fleets, we just need rage. Back on Earth, the media tried to hide it, as always. But people knew. They could feel it in the air. A tension that stretched between continents. Everyone sensed the cold metal hand of extinction wrapping its fingers around our throat. But instead of panic, there was resolve. People didn't run, they built. Mothers welded armor plates onto old civilian transports. Teenagers programmed drones in basements. Ex-cons volunteered for suicide missions. Old veterans crawled out of retirement and limped into command centers with bloodshot eyes and steady hands. The Council expected panic. Instead, they got purpose. Director Morrow, old bastard that he was, oversaw the black site rollout of Project Hollow Dawn, a synthetic plague designed to target Council biogenetics, to be launched through spore clouds in space, illegal by every galactic code. We launched it anyway. That was Earth's rule now. If you don't like the game, flip the board. The Council tried diplomacy again, if you could call it that. A transmission broadcast across all frequencies, a message from one of their high seats, a bloated thing wrapped in silk and jewels, face hidden behind ceremonial plating. "Surrender now," it said, "and we will preserve a fraction of your species. Resist, and you will be forgotten." I laughed. Forgotten? We're the species that wrote history in blood. who raised empires with stones and brought them down with words. We were never meant to be remembered peacefully. We were meant to be remembered painfully. The second wave arrived 4 days later. Heavier, angrier, a full offensive, coordinated and merciless. Earth's orbit lit up like a battlefield. Council carriers blanketed the sky. Orbital stations disintegrated. Satellites turned to ash. Every city on Earth prepared for impact. But we were waiting. They had studied our weaknesses. They hadn't studied our hate. That's when Operation Black Dust kicked in. Thousands of civilian transports, disguised as refugee ships, were actually troop carriers, loaded with nerve agents, thermobaric weapons, and anti-boarding drones. When the Council ships tried to capture instead of destroy, they opened their doors to hell. One by one, their ships went dark from the inside. We didn't care about honor or protocol. We cared about pain. If we were going down, we were taking as many of them with us as humanly possible. The war shifted after that. The Council stopped broadcasting ultimatums. They stopped capturing. They started erasing. Earth's surface became a graveyard of monuments, craters, bones, glassed ruins of once glorious cities. But we fought on. We built underground. We moved in the dark. We launched counterstrikes from the ocean floor and the frozen edges of the poles. And everywhere they went, they found us waiting. Not organized, not elegant, but present. Like a virus that wouldn't die. Like a whisper in their sleep. Like a species that refused to be erased. There was a moment, just a small one, where it all nearly collapsed. The Council launched a kinetic spear at Earth's core, a weapon meant to trigger a tectonic meltdown. They missed by miles, but it still caused a global quake. Entire continents shifted. Coastal cities vanished beneath tidal waves. Billions were gone. I was underground when it hit. Buried beneath rock and steel, clutching the side of a data node as the entire Earth groaned beneath me. I remember thinking this was it, that we'd finally broken. But when the shaking stopped, and the dust cleared, and the comm lines crackled back to life, someone was singing. A child's voice, off-key, trembling, but singing, and then others joined. One by one, voices from bunkers, shattered towers, ruined hospitals, singing the old anthem, not because they believed in flags or governments, but because it was human, and if the Council wanted to erase us, they'd have to silence every last damn voice. That was when I knew. We weren't dying. We were becoming. They used to call us unpredictable. Now they called us something else. Unknowable. That was the word spreading across the intercepted Council frequencies, spoken in hushed tones, encrypted transmissions, and panicked retreats. Unknowable, unstoppable, unnatural. What began as a tactical war had become psychological. We had crawled into their minds, into their protocols, into their nightmares. We weren't winning through strength. We were winning through infection. Humanity was becoming a myth, and myths were far harder to kill. The Council still had the numbers. Their fleets blanketed solar systems. Their tech eclipsed ours by centuries. But every time they sent a fleet into Sol, they lost ships, they lost time, they lost men, and worse, they lost confidence. Our strategy was simple. Make the war cost more than submission ever would. We didn't strike grand targets anymore. That was predictable. We hit food convoys, medical supply lines, oxygen filtration systems, not to destroy the enemy, but to cripple the machine that kept them moving. They sent drones to track us. We hacked them. They sent assassins. We turned them. They sent peace envoys. We buried them. We used every part of the corpse. I stood in the command bunker beneath what was once the Alps, watching the latest footage from Titan. A council research station, one of their largest, burned like a signal fire on the black horizon. Director Morrow stood beside me, silent. "They never expected us to learn so fast," I said. He nodded slowly. Their arrogance was their weakness. I turned to him. "How long until they crack?" He gave me that tired look he always wore, like he'd lived too long and read too many death reports. "They won't crack, not yet, but they'll start to question. And once they question, they hesitate. That's when we kill." He walked away without another word. That was how we all were now. No speeches, no celebrations, just blood and silence. 3 months into the counterinsurgency, we intercepted something rare, a council distress call. It wasn't meant for us, but we heard it. A battlecruiser in Sector 39, caught in a radiation storm, was begging for backup. Its shielding was compromised, life support failing, no nearby fleets, no help coming. They never thought we'd be the ones to answer. I ordered the Grey Widow, an old orbital repair vessel, to intercept. Not to destroy, not to salvage, to rescue. It confused everyone. But that was the point. We boarded the cruiser under white flags, suits glowing with artificial council colors. The aliens inside were dying, hallucinating, some barely conscious. We patched their wounds, restored pressure, stopped the bleed. Then we left. No bombs, no sabotage, just a recording left on their central feed. A simple message. We are human, remember that. We didn't need them to thank us. We needed them to wonder why. Because nothing terrifies tyrants more than mercy from the people they tried to destroy. The next council broadcast came with shaking voices and veiled threats. They accused us of manipulating the minds of their soldiers, of infecting their people with ideologies, fear, and something far worse, hope. They were right. Our message wasn't just resistance, it was contagious. Other species, those long enslaved by council control, began to question. Some defected. A mining colony in the Zareth Belt revolted and sent a message directly to Earth. "We heard what you did. We are ready to bleed with you." A ripple became a wave. For the first time, humanity wasn't the lone defiant voice. Others were waking up, and the council was terrified. Because fear is easy to control. But inspiration, that's a damn wildfire. They launched their retaliation swiftly. No diplomacy, no warning. They deployed their Leviathan-class flagship, the Pillar of Order, into Earth's orbit. The thing was a continent in the sky, bristling with weapons that could atomize cities, equipped with thought shields and artificial gravity fields. It wasn't a ship. It was a message. We are gods, and this is your punishment. It hovered for 3 days. We didn't fire. We didn't run. We waited. Because in its arrogance, the council had brought everything it had into one target. And we had been waiting a long time for that. When it finally fired its first round, a plasma beam meant to turn Berlin into glass, something went wrong. The weapon overloaded, exploded. The sky lit up in a white pulse. The pillar's left side fractured, its shields collapsed, and its artificial gravity began to implode inward. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't an attack. It was hacking. The virus had been uploaded the moment our Mercy ship boarded the cruiser 3 months earlier. A sleeping code buried deep, quiet, and patient, waiting for one command. We called it Echo. When the council ran diagnostics, they found nothing. Their AI systems cleared the file. But Echo wasn't a file. It was a thought, a sequence that rewrote logic paths and introduced one human concept into their godlike machines. Doubt. That's all we needed. The pillar burned for 2 hours. When it finally crashed into the Atlantic, it sent waves that touched 5 continents. We didn't cheer. We didn't celebrate. We just moved to the next target. Because this wasn't a war for glory, it was a war for memory. We wanted the stars to remember who we were. Weeks passed. Council territory shrank. Not from conquest, but from fear. They pulled back, cut off outer colonies, issued orders of total silence in contested sectors. But silence didn't save them. Their empire had been built on obedience, and obedience was rotting. We intercepted another message, this time from a council civilian transport. We believed you were monsters, but now we ask, are you saviors? I didn't reply. Because we weren't saviors. We were just men who refused to die. And that, in the end, was all we ever needed to be. We were deep into the black now. The kind of war that doesn't make it into history books because no one wants to remember what it took to survive. Morality had long since been put to sleep. All that mattered was keeping the light on, our light, no matter how dim it flickered. And right now, it was flickering hard. The council had retreated, yes. Their outer sectors were in collapse, their fleets scattered, their morale bleeding out. But that didn't mean they were finished. Far from it. A cornered god was more dangerous than a marching army. We knew they were planning something. The sudden silence, the disappearance of their communication satellites, the ceasing of all forward engagements. It wasn't surrender. It was the inhale before a final exhale. The kind that scorches everything. And we weren't ready. Mars was crippled. The moon's fortress grid had burned out. Earth was cracked and choking. We had no ships to spare, no fuel left for another major offensive. What remained of our military floated in scavenged armor and held guns stitched together from scrap and spite. And still, we prepared. Because we'd come too far to let it end with a whimper. Inside the shattered remains of Geneva Command, I met with what was left of the Earth Coalition. Generals with prosthetic limbs and hollowed eyes, civilians turned strategists, black site directors, underground tech lords, rogue AI handlers. The room reeked of desperation. They've pulled every asset from council space into one location, said Director Morrow, pointing at a glowing dot on the holographic map. The old Dyson ring around Nephris 5. They're reinforcing it, heavily. This is the final bastion. What's inside? I asked. Information, he replied. Everything. Council archives, genetic databases, weapon schematics, species registries, the backbone of their control. If we burn that, we erase the idea of their empire, I finished. He nodded, and spark a collapse they can't rebuild from. General Eddins frowned. We don't have the ships. We don't have the bodies. We don't need a fleet, I said quietly. Just one chance. They all looked at me, and I told them the plan. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't elegant, but it was human. We called it Project Final Silence. A single carrier, rebuilt from a mining hauler and outfitted with cloaking arrays stolen from the wreckage of council scouts. On board, a fire team of 6, loaded with experimental tech we barely tested, each carrying a compressed quantum spike loaded with a kill code. The idea was simple. Slip through their defense grid, get inside the central data core of the Nephris ring, and detonate the spike. No bang, just erasure. A code bomb. Wipe their records. Wipe their authority. Wipe the memory of their dominion from their own systems. A total collapse of identity. The team was to be called Ghost Unit. And I was leading it. Before we launched, I sent a final message back to Earth Command. Not a speech, just words. To anyone listening, don't remember us as soldiers. Don't remember us as heroes. Remember that we chose to stand. Even when we knew it wouldn't end with parades. Remember that Earth said no and meant it. Then we left. The carrier hummed silently as it slipped through the void. No escorts, no signals, just darkness. Our names didn't matter, because we'd already died the day we defied gods. Nephris 5 glowed like a wounded star. The Dyson ring was massive, an ancient marvel from a time when the Council still believed in creation instead of control. Now it pulsed with scanners and turrets and patrol ships too numerous to count. We didn't fight them. We slipped through them. The cloak worked, mostly. A proximity ping caught us just as we approached the docking hatch. We didn't wait for full scans. We breached. No alarms at first, just the soft hiss of pressurized entry. Then all hell broke loose. The inside of the ring was a cathedral to oppression, walls lined with statues of extinct species, glass cases filled with relics of conquered worlds, data conduits humming with artificial life. We moved fast, through maintenance shafts and ventilation tunnels, following the stolen schematics downloaded during our earlier raids. First kill was quiet, an insectoid technician who didn't even have time to scream. Second wasn't. A patrol of 4 Council soldiers spotted us in a hallway. We responded with brutality. One of my men, Hutch, took a plasma round to the neck. He dropped without a sound. No one spoke. We just kept moving. Every hallway we passed became a reminder of what the Council had erased. Murals of burned planets, lists of compliant races, videos of submission ceremonies paraded like holy rites. This wasn't an archive, it was a church. And we were here to burn it down. We reached the core chamber with only 4 of us left. The defenses were brutal. Automated drones, sensor fields, AI constructs that screamed in your head instead of your ears. We lost Jacoby there, vaporized mid-stride. No time to mourn. I reached the central console and slotted the spike. It asked for a final command. A phrase? A word, and I knew exactly which one to give it. The one that started this all. Number. The spike glowed once, then vanished into the core's interface. We ran, not because we were scared, because we knew what came next. The ring convulsed. Sirens blared, the lights flickered. And then it began. Not an explosion, but silence. Total, absolute, obliterating silence. One by one, the ring's systems shut down. Archives deleted. Defense protocols wiped. Identity cores scrambled. Every database gone. Every thread of the Council's control cut. We escaped in a stolen patrol ship, just as the ring began to break apart under its own weight. We watched it crumble behind us, and none of us spoke. There were no words for what we had just ended. Across the galaxy, Council systems fell into disarray. Orders stopped coming. Records were gone. Command hierarchies broke down. Civilizations that had been held in line by fear and administration found themselves unshackled. Not because of hope, but because there was no one left to tell them no. Earth didn't win through force. It won through erasure. It made the gods forget they were gods. And in the vacuum that followed, the galaxy didn't weep. It exhaled. The galaxy didn't explode after the fall of the Council. It unwound. Like a machine that had been running too long, too hard, too controlled. The silence that followed the destruction of the Nephris ring spread faster than any scream. One by one, star systems flickered offline from Council command. Ships lost connection with their masters. Colonies sat idle, waiting for orders that never came. And when none arrived, they remembered how to think for themselves. Earth didn't declare victory. We didn't send out diplomats or parades or celebrations. We didn't have the strength or the delusion. We were still bleeding, still burning. We'd won, but only in the sense that we didn't lose. The council was gone, but so was half the human race. I returned to Earth 7 weeks after Nephris fell. The sky was gray, not from war, but from ash, smoke, and atmosphere that had been punched and clawed too many times by weapons never meant to be fired in our cradle. Geneva was gone. New Zurich was underwater. The Americas had fractured into splinter states, each one limping forward with barely any power, no supply chains, and too many ghosts. We didn't rebuild. We endured. The World Military Command didn't exist anymore. I wandered what was left of it. Old bunkers, collapsed tunnels, rooms full of dead plans and forgotten names. A boy stood near one of the collapsed data cores, poking at it with a stick. He couldn't have been older than 10. Thin, dirty, but alive. He looked at me like I was some kind of monument. "You part of the old world?" he asked. I gave him a tired smile. "Something like that." "You kill them all?" he asked. I shook my head. No one ever kills them all. "But they're gone, right?" "Gone enough." He nodded, then ran off, as if that was all he needed. I watched him disappear into the rubble and wondered how many others like him were out there. Born in fire, raised in silence, too young to know what a planet without war looked like. Too young to understand what we'd lost. Director Morrow found me weeks later, or what was left of him. He walked with a limp now. One eye was glass. He'd aged 2 decades in 2 months. "Congratulations," he said without sarcasm. "You destroyed a 1,000-year empire." I didn't respond. He sat beside me on the wreckage of a comm tower, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "You ever wonder what comes next?" he asked. "No," I said. "That's someone else's problem now." He laughed bitterly. "There's no one else left." We stared at the dead city. "You know what the problem with winning is?" he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "You become the thing people fear next." And with that, he walked away. The transmissions started soon after. Across the galaxy, new voices rose up. Former slaves who now controlled star systems, alien races claiming independence, warlords carving up council sectors, revolutions turning into dictatorships, chaos dressed in freedom's skin. Some praised Earth. Most feared it. They'd seen what we could do, what we were willing to become when pushed. They didn't want saviors anymore. They wanted space. So we gave it to them. We stopped broadcasting. No more warnings, no more speeches. We turned inward. Humanity would not lead. Humanity would survive. Let them write their own stories now. We'd written ours in blood already. I walked through the ruins of Moscow one morning. It had snowed the night before, and the bomb craters were hidden beneath soft white blankets. It almost looked peaceful. A woman emerged from one of the shelters. She was older, one arm missing, the other holding a metal pipe as a makeshift cane. "You one of the soldiers?" she asked. "I was." "You kill them?" "Some." She nodded. "My boy said you scared the stars." I chuckled. "I didn't mean to." "Good," she said, then walked away. That's what Earth had become now. Not a capital, not a power, just a reminder. A whisper in the dark. Don't push them. Don't test them. They said no to gods. And gods died. A few of the ghost unit survived. Hutch's body was never recovered, but Jacoby had made it out. Lost half his face and one lung, but still kicking. We met one last time in what used to be an airport hangar, now turned into a refugee shelter. He didn't speak much anymore. Didn't have to. He looked at me, handed me a flask, and we sat in silence for an hour. 2 broken tools from a war that broke the sky. He finally asked, "Think they'll come back? The council? Or something worse?" I stared at the sky. "They always do." He nodded. "You ready for that?" I looked at the ruins, the people crawling from them, the children who only knew this life, and the ones who'd build the next. "Next time," I said, "we don't wait. We don't ask. We don't warn." He smirked. And I knew that meant yes. That was the new humanity. Not loud, not proud, just present, watching, waiting. The galaxy moved on. Trade routes opened again. New alliances formed. Other species rose to power. But Earth stayed quiet. And in that silence was a legend. A myth about a world that told the Council no and meant it. Not because they wanted war, but because they'd already lived through worse. The last line of the legend said, "If you knock on Earth's door, be ready to bleed." And that was enough. We didn't need to rule. We didn't need to speak. We just needed them to remember. The galaxy moved on. At least, that's what they told themselves. The Council was dead, its fleets scattered or silent. Old colonies declared independence. New powers sprouted like weeds in a field abandoned by the farmer. Trade resumed. Treaties were inked. Warlords put on crowns. Freedom, they said, had finally come. But in every corner of the galaxy, in every Senate hall and war room, one name still pulsed like a wound that wouldn't heal. Earth. They never came back, never sent diplomats, never claimed territory, never answered hails. They just vanished into their own dust. But the fear remained. Because while Earth had gone silent, their echo still thundered. In the sand-blasted wastes of Varnus II, a merchant tribe passed stories by firelight. One tale always returned, of a species that said no to the gods and made the stars bleed. "They used only one word," the old woman whispered, "and it was enough." Children didn't believe it, not really. It was too big, too final. But they still jumped when the sky cracked with thunder. Because Earth wasn't a story anymore, it was a warning. In the Veltaran Empire, a rising power began building fleets. Ships longer than cities, bristling with weapons. They carved new trade routes, expanded colonies, and drafted conquest plans. They spoke often of dominion. Until one scout ship, searching near the Sol perimeter, vanished. Not destroyed, not attacked, just gone. No signal, no debris, just silence. They sent another, same result. No violence, no return. Just erasure. Veltaran's expansion halted overnight. A rumor started among their admirals. Earth is still there, watching. And worse, they remember. On the academic moon of Orlis, a historian named Keparn dedicated her life to studying Earth. She gathered fragments of intercepted human transmissions, reconstructed footage from the Council archives, and studied the ancient Earth word, no. Her thesis was banned. Her research erased. She disappeared 2 months later. Some said she fled. Others said she went to find Earth herself. Whatever the truth, her final paper leaked before the purge. It read, "The problem isn't that Earth fought back, it's that Earth learned. And if they learned once, they can learn again." 50 years after the fall of the Council, a new galactic order was forming. Loose, nervous, built on tentative handshakes and unspoken fears. Every treaty had a line that wasn't written down. Every map had a place that wasn't drawn. Earth. Some called it a dead world. Others, a sleeping god. A few believed it was still burning, not with fire, but with resolve. Because nothing had come out of Sol in decades. Not ships, not signals, not survivors. But when probes drifted too close, they were always found later, cracked open, wiped clean, sent home with one chilling addition: a carved word etched deep into metal. Number, and then came the flare. It started small. A long dormant beacon near Jupiter blinked. One pulse, then silence, then 2 pulses, then 3. Soon, across the system, Earth's old defense satellites began blinking in a strange sequence. At first, other races thought it was noise, static, leftover code, until someone cracked the pattern. It wasn't random, it was a countdown. Panic spread fast. The Veltaren mobilized fleets. The Wrathi began evacuating border colonies. The Jinhal Syndicate offered Earth tribute, blindly, through encrypted frequencies, hoping silence was better than a reply. The countdown continued. 72 hours, 60, 48. No one knew what it was for. A weapon? A message? A return? Galactic forums exploded with speculation. Pirate networks sent scouts. Black market oracles made fortunes reading prophecies from old Earth transmissions. But Earth said nothing. Not a word. Just ticking. 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 At 24 hours, a ship entered Sol from the edge. It wasn't human. It was automated. An ancient council probe, long since forgotten. Someone, or something, had reprogrammed it. It carried a message, not data, not orders, a voice. A human voice. My voice. We are still here, it said, and we have learned. Then the countdown stopped. No explosions. No invasions. Just the truth. They were listening. And Earth was awake again. That message broke the galaxy. Not through fear, but through uncertainty. Because the dead don't speak. And Earth had spoken. It hadn't threatened. It hadn't warned. It had simply reminded them, we're still here. We remember. We learn. And now the galaxy knew. Earth never forgot how to fight. They'd just been waiting. The galaxy didn't sleep that night. Across every star-faring species, every military council, every slum-born scavenger fleet, all eyes turned to Sol. The pulse had stopped, the countdown had ended, and Earth had spoken. We are still here, and we have learned. No declarations, no demands, just that voice, tired and sharp, reverberating across frequencies that hadn't been touched in decades. But it was enough. For the first time in a generation, the fear wasn't that Earth would attack. It was that Earth had a reason not to. In the black edge of the Sol system, cloaked ships hovered. Every race sent someone to watch. Some were scouts, others diplomats. A few were fools who thought this was the moment to strike. None came home. The Watchers never saw gunfire. No fleets emerged from the planetary crust. No new weapons unveiled. But they all felt something. A pressure. A silence. A signal that never left their minds. Humanity wasn't rebuilding. It was becoming. Inside a hollowed-out city buried beneath Antarctica's ice shelf, I sat in what used to be a command room. The lights flickered from geothermal power. The floor creaked from melting glaciers above. But the screens were still alive, pulling in galactic comms, decoding, watching. I hadn't spoken into a mic since the flare. Didn't need to. The silence did the work for me now. You really think they're scared of us again? Asked Jacoby, limping into the room, half a bottle of synthetic whiskey in his hand. I nodded. They were never scared of our ships, I said. They were scared we'd change the rules again. He chuckled. Yeah, damn right. He slumped into a chair beside me. We could have ruled it all, he muttered. Every piece of it. They'd have bowed. Maybe, I said. But then we'd be them. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. Because deep down we both knew the truth. We didn't fight the Council for power. We fought because they told us we couldn't say no, and that word, that choice, was the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The weeks that followed were tense. All across known space, species began rewriting their laws. New political systems rose, built not on compliance, but uncertainty. No one wanted to be the next target of Earth's silence. Worship cults started forming. Earth wasn't seen as a planet anymore. It was a concept, a force, an ancient, wounded god that had bled enough to become untouchable. They called it the No Doctrine, the belief that refusal is a divine act, that surrender is an infection, that to disobey is to live. Some species outlawed it immediately, others adopted it as their new constitution. The Council had ruled by structure. Earth ruled by fear of choice. And both were effective. But only one made the stars hold their breath. Eventually, they sent a message. A diplomatic packet, encoded, encrypted, begging for contact, not from the old powers. They were all gone. This came from a unified coalition, a loose group of planets and species who called themselves the Accord of Balance. They asked for a meeting, not in their territory, not in neutral space, but on Earth, in the ruins, with me. They didn't know my name, only my voice, and they wanted answers, not to what Earth wanted, but what it would do next. I met them at the edge of the blast crater that used to be what the Council called Human Settlement Zone 1. We called it Boston. 6 ships landed. Small, unarmed, 1 representative each. Alien faces, different limbs, different languages. All of them nervous. Not one of them looked me in the eye for long. I didn't stand on ceremony. I pointed to the crater. You see that? They nodded. That's what happens when you ask the wrong question. One of them spoke, trembling, voice filtered through a translator. What do humans want now? And there it was. The question they were all afraid to say out loud. The question that had lingered since the Council fell. I looked at the crater, then back at them, and I told the truth. Nothing. They stared at me, confused. We don't want to rule you. We don't want to trade. We don't want to be worshipped. We don't want to conquer. We're not here to lead a new order. I took a breath. We just want to be left alone. They hesitated. And if we don't? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Then we remind you why silence is more terrifying than war. They left. Grateful, terrified, satisfied. And in their hearts, they understood the only real law that mattered now. Don't wake the sleeping wolf. Not unless you're ready to bleed. Earth didn't rebuild in the way others hoped. We didn't put cities back together. We didn't restore the governments. We didn't rise from the ashes. We stayed in them. The old ruins became warnings. Our skies remained empty. Our signals silent. We didn't expand outward. We dug inward, deeper into ourselves. A species no longer at war, but not at peace either. A species that had become something else. I walked the edge of the crater often. Sometimes I saw kids there, scavengers, orphans born after the war, raised on fear and frost and memory. They didn't cry. They didn't whine. They watched everything. took nothing for granted. I once asked a boy what he thought happened here. He shrugged. This is where the gods died, right? I asked who told him that. Nobody, it's just what it feels like. Smart kid. I gave him a ration bar and moved on. In time, the galaxy adjusted. Earth became a border you didn't cross, a word you didn't speak too loudly. The myth outgrew the reality. We never showed our weapons. We never proved we still had fleets. But everyone believed we did. And belief was stronger than steel. One last message went out from Earth, years later. Just one. A whisper, carried across decaying frequencies, caught in relay stations half dead from time and storms. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a statement. It was a question. Not for power. Not for control. Just one quiet reminder. If you were us, would you trust you? No one answered. And Earth didn't ask again. That was the real victory, not in death, not in survival, but in the echo that kept the stars quiet, in the weight of a word so heavy it silenced empires. Number, the word that made gods bleed, the word that gave humanity something no weapon ever could. Control, not over others, but over ourselves. And in the end, that was all we ever wanted. Not to lead, not to conquer, just to choose, even if that choice meant everything else burned. The galaxy moved on, but they never forgot. Because deep in the void, past the mapped stars and golden roots, one shadow still lingered. Unmoving, unanswered, untouched. Earth, not just a planet, a warning, a question, a promise. And when that shadow finally speaks again, they'll listen. They always will.